All right, so we have Stephen here with us today. He is the founder and CEO of Synergist. And Stephen, how long have you been a member of founder groups so far?
I believe I joined in September, or it was late August. It was right when I set up the legal entity for the company. I saw it and I thought that would be really helpful to have other people you can meet with, even just psychologically, even if there wasn't as
Sure.
much content. My uncle had been a member of YPO and he has a successful company that he started. And I remember him speaking like 15 years ago about how helpful that was to him. But this seemed like it was obviously targeted specifically to startup founders but had some of those elements that he talked about that were so great.
We are very glad to have you. So Synergist, Stephen, tell us about Synergist. Give us the sort of 2-minute elevator pitch and how you describe Synergist to somebody else.
Sure, yeah. So I think that there's some challenges happening both for e-commerce retailers and banks. One is obviously the cost of advertising, which is common to both, is going up and up, and so for e-commerce retailers, it's extremely important for them to have high conversion rates so they can make sure they convert someone that they just spend a ton of advertising on to get them to their site. At the same time, credit card companies are also getting kind of squeezed out. Like Google search ad prices, everything like that are just going up through the roof. Having been the head of digital acquisitions for Chase's credit card division, I saw this problem firsthand. So Synergist solves this by embedding credit card offers in the shopping cart of e-commerce providers. And the reason this works is because we offer a $200 discount for the purchase that day. That helps drive increased sales for the e-commerce direct-to-consumer brand. And then it also opens up a whole new channel that's a lot higher quality and more scalable and affordable than what the credit card companies have available to them today.
Great. And you would think that what you're doing seems like a no-brainer, kind of like, the rack of gum right at, checkout when you're at the point of sale. Why aren't, these financial institutions? So I'm going to describe you sort of as marketing for fintech, or if the fintech marketing for financial institutions. Why aren't they doing it now? Like, how is it that they missed that gap, or how do we get here for this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the banks have had a lot of success with this kind of offer with co-brands. So that for people aren't familiar with the lingo, that's when Chase, for example, will issue a credit card, like a United credit card that has United's name on it, as opposed to Chase. They've had tons of success with United, Marriott, Southwest, Amazon with these kind of offers. Couple things. One is, even though it's within credit cards, it's like a whole nother division within credit cards. So all of that experience and knowledge and understanding of the success of that it resides in one group. But then the other group in the credit card division that's marketing its own credit cards has no experience with, directly working with e-commerce companies for marketing, other than, with affiliates and, paid search and paid media type providers or vendors. And so, that's a big thing. I think the other thing, which is we saw with buy now, pay later, you saw that really take off in the e-commerce channel. And you could ask the same question, why didn't the banks do that? I mean, obviously had all capabilities to do that. I would say there's two big reasons, having been at Chase. One is the bank speaks to it, but really struggles with really getting the consumer perspective. There's always like this view of like, getting the consumer to come to Chase, as opposed to, I think that most consumers don't really care about finance, and they would like that to be something that just happens automatically in the background. And so, my view is that you need to go to the customer, so where the customer is, and make it super easy and seamless, so that they don't even need to think about it or separately research and go find a financial product. So that's why I think buy now, pay later has been so successful. The other second reason is these very large banks are poorly suited to dealing with integrations with many counterparties. The whole way that the organization is set up and the way technology is set up there is, it costs, let's say I'm going to make something up, but let's say it costs at least $200,000 just to spin up a project. And every integration with each, e-commerce brand would be kind of like almost like its own project. So it would be obviously extremely expensive. The way that they operate today, they would have to completely reorganize how they do things. They did try, my former manager, who was the head of acquisition, said that at one point they did have a similar idea and said that, they called up Airbnb knowing that they could really only deal with, very large brands, and because of the model that I just explained, and, got a kind of a no response. Not surprising, because Airbnb is very protective over its brand. It doesn't want to have anything else on there. They even create their own payment solution so they didn't have to use someone else's. So Airbnb was clearly not the right partner to speak to. And then they just kind of were like, oh, okay, I guess this will be too hard. And then this didn't do it. Banks don't like to do projects that don't have, like they'd rather do a project that makes them $20, but they know 100% will work, than a project that will make them $100 where there's like an 80% chance it will work, or 90%.
That's fantastic. Few points I want to point out. Hopefully we'll just revisit them for everybody who's ever going to listen to this or watch this and learn from your experience. First is that domain expertise, really understanding the problem and the experience of the user. And in this case, you really wanted to understand the consumer. And the second is solving a problem that's painful for a very large stakeholder and relieving that pain. And so banks had a specific pain. You were able to identify and say, okay, we can reduce that friction and help you with that. A lot of times, if you can go and solve a problem that is painful, that your stakeholders can say, run you and say, I have that problem. Thank you so much for solving it. You're really going to hit that sweet spot and find that product market fit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in our case, we almost have like 3 customers, because we've got the e-commerce direct to consumer brand, we've got the bank and the consumer, right? And so it's definitely complicated because we have to understand all of their pain points and and solve for them. But that's what I think, I'm a big believer that, like, yes, that's challenging, but if you're going to do something really easy and simple, it's probably going to, that space is probably being taken where it's hard to compete in that anyway.
Exactly. Well, you just completed your first funding round, and that's $1 million, which is no small feat unto itself. So first, congratulations. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you here. And we were talking earlier before this about the fundraising process. What did you want to share? You wanted to get, sort of the first piece of advice out up front based on what other people might be thinking or wanting to learn from your experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing was really, like I mentioned earlier to you, is that, there's a lot of stops and starts, right? You have a lot of people that say yes and then don't give you anything, or people who, seem really close to giving you something, whether it be institutions or individuals, and then they don't give it to you, or they give you like a sliver of what they originally said they would, when things come down to, actually signing documents and sending money over. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew, listening to this, if you haven't already gone through it, that's completely normal, and like, don't lose like momentum or, hope or whatever. So, if you've got, let's say, a few people to invest and you think that's enough to raise what you need to raise, don't stop. Like, let's say you're negotiating paperwork with them, don't let that stop you from continue to setting up more and more meetings with others, so that you've always got a full pipeline. It's always better to be able to tell people, look, I'm done, I finished the round, sorry you missed it. I'll be happy to reach out to you next time we're raising money. So So that's really, really critical. And I think related to that, there's the psychological element. I think that investors can tell if you're nervous, and they can tell it, just like if you're dating, and you're trying to date someone and the other person realizes that, like, you think they're a lot hotter than you are, it doesn't always work as well. And so I think that the same thing applies in investing, and you need to make sure that doesn't happen. The way I did it, everyone has their own way, but the way I did it was to make sure that I always had lots of other meetings already scheduled, so that any one meeting, I never felt like if that meeting didn't go well, that that was the end of things or whatever, right? So I always knew, hey, it doesn't matter. Worst case, I learned a bunch of things. These are smart people. I might get some good feedback, some more advice. And I did. I got some great feedback that helped me improve what I'm doing from people who have invested and people who didn't invest. But knowing that I had always another meeting or 3 or 4 meetings in the next week or 2 weeks made me realize, no worries, this doesn't work out, I have another one, and I think that helped in the meetings too, to come across more relaxed.
That's fantastic. I've got a gajillion questions going through my mind, but let's approach this. Let's take a linear approach. So what I'm going to do is show just a quick overview of your pitch deck. And I had the pleasure of being able to just provide a little bit of feedback. Very little was needed. It was fantastic as it was, but I'll walk you through the pitch deck, and then I'll just point out a few things, and you tell me what's going through your mind as you're maybe building the deck or pitching the deck. What I love is your first title slide and just being straight up front, $200 discount, embedded online shopping carts. It's just so straightforward. There's no marketing jargon, anything like that. You explain what it was, had the benefits. How much do you use this just flat out? Like, are you putting this on repeat? How much do you repeat this, say it to potential investors, everyone you talk to? Like, what's the importance of this initial introduction?
It's very, very important. A lot of investors I spoke to said to me that a lot of startups take way too long telling them what it is they actually do. And when you're an early stage company, I think that's really, really important. They want you to have a big vision and, and think big and whatnot. And with that often comes with, some sort of, kind of jargon, like you mentioned. But when it's an early stage company, what the feedback I got was they just want to know what you're about, what you're doing. And then you can talk about, and this isn't the only thing I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking much bigger, and there's a lot of other cool things that we're going to do beyond this. But that was what I had heard.
What you just said is so worth repeating. Too many founders, too many early stage startups take way too long explaining what they do. That's the reason we really hammer down on that one liner right up front instead of something catchy like a marketing slogan, which might work on a billboard or an ad. Just get right into it right up front, so the investor knows what to do, what not, what you do and what you don't do. And I'll just blast to this. Now, this is the deck that you send out as a screener. Did you use this deck as well to pitch and go through it? Did you have something else? What was the process?
I'm trying to remember the one I sent you. How many pages is this one?
This one, I think. Let me just take a look here.
I think you have the shorter one.
I have the yeah. I asked for the shorter one for sure.
Yeah. So there's a shorter one and a longer one. To be honest, this is how it worked too. But another thing I want to maybe bring up is that when I first started, I didn't know what to say. I didn't have a whole ton, so I had like 3 or 4 slides or something, right? And I just didn't stop that from me just getting out there and starting to talk to friendlies, like people who I knew, former colleagues, that kind of thing. And then as I got more and more feedback, it allowed me, and I just built more and more, like people ask certain questions. So I go research the answer to that and then create a slide for it. And so I ended up with like a longer and longer deck. And then it just became a question of, okay, depending on who I'm meeting, and what meeting it is, which of those do I bring? So it's like I had like a library almost of slides, and I could be like, okay, this guy, I'm gonna like you show these 4 slides, and or those 12 slides. So that's another thing, similar to like you probably heard people, resume advice, that if you're applying for a job, you want to tailor your resume and what you're saying in there to what they would care about. The same thing is the case here. And so I started with, I had a pitch deck for retailers that I was using, and I was like, okay, I gotta like adjust this somewhat for investors. And it was definitely a good place to start, because I'm starting by thinking about customer in a way, right? So it wasn't terrible, but I definitely had to adapt the message. But I also didn't spend like 9 months trying to perfect the message before I got out there. Like, just get out there, just start talking to people. Don't worry about like looking stupid or whatever. Like, people will tell you, especially if you ask for feedback. I think it's good to say, like, at the end of a meeting, just say, especially a meeting where you wouldn't expect an answer, just say like, what is it that you like about what we just talked about, or other things that give you some pause that you need to think more about. Because they might tell you that, whereas when they actually give you the no, they might not feel as comfortable giving you that feedback.
Well, that's a great point. Getting feedback. I think this is something that early stage or early inexperienced or first time founders, they worry about their pitch deck, and they kind of get into analysis paralysis. And there's no such thing as a perfect pitch deck. There's only what's perfect for you right at that time. And that way people can get into this iterative process where they say, like, you had a library, and this is what it advises. There's a pitch deck that you email out. There's a pitch deck you walk through. And now you're even saying there's a pitch deck depending on who you're going to be in front of, and be free and willing to say, hey, I'm going to have multiple tools in this box for pitching, get that feedback and continue to refine. So how long did it take you to sort of get to this point where you said, hey, I'm pretty happy with my arsenal? Was that 9 months, or how long was it for you?
No. I didn't even think I was going to be raising any money until end of August. Before that, I thought I was just going to bootstrap everything with my own savings. So it took, I would say, to get to the slides to be pretty much what I ended up using for most meetings, about a month and a half. But I didn't wait. I was having meetings during that whole month and a half, right? I'm just saying that it got better. And so a month and a half in, I was, then at that point I was starting to talk to a lot more institutional investors. So that was good. And I guess I can get into, I don't know if that's a separate question you have, but why did I talk to institutional investors, even though I was doing a pre-seed round?
For sure. Absolutely. I think this is a great
Yeah.
point, and what founders should start thinking of. So how did you approach that?
It was by accident.
Okay.
So I was just reaching out to people I knew, because I realized pretty quickly that people who I'd actually worked with were the most likely to, bet on me and invest, because they knew my product worked firsthand, and also they're more willing to deal with my early stages of my crappy deck. And by the way, those same people I met early on that I might have just had a chat with, when I showed them a month and a half later what the deck was, a lot that difference, seeing the difference was a big reason. I think a lot of them then were like, hey, I want to put money in. Like, I'm really impressed by where this has come along in the last month. So I think that, like, sometimes it's not a bad idea to show something earlier, and then just they see the progress. I think can sometimes be more effective than just showing them. Like, if I'd shown nothing and just gone to them a month and a half in, they'd be like, okay, great. Well, let me know, like, if things progress, so sometimes showing something not as great and then showing how much you've improved since then in a short time is a great way of getting people interested. Sorry, I think I lost the
Well, so let me highlight. And again, this is another fantastic point. I love the fact that you're just openly sharing your experience. A lot of times founders don't realize that investors don't invest in the product. They invest in the founder. That's the best way that we invest. So watching you overcome, iterate, evolve, that's impressive for an investor. And that starts to really bond the investor to the founder and say, I believe in Stephen now. At first, idea, but not exactly sure, but holy cow, look how far he's come. And so staying in contact and building that relationship. But then the other thing is, and I tell this story all the time, my first angel investor I met by accident. I was sitting in a class and I leaned over and I said, "You're doing that all wrong." I just gave some pre-advice, kind of obnoxious about it. Got to talking, found out he had a lot of money. And then one day I just said, "Hey, listen, I got a great idea. Give me a bunch of money. I'll start a company. I'll meet my goals. You can get a return." And I wasn't even looking for an investor. I didn't even have an idea for a startup. I just said, "Hey, I need money and I'm going to want to start this business instead of looking for a job." So most founders don't realize so much happens what seems like accident, but it's because you are constantly out there developing momentum, networking. So you said you met institutional investors by accident. How did that go? What was
Yeah.
the result of that?
Yeah. So one of my former colleagues who I used to be really close with, he said, look, I do invest in early stage stuff, but I only do it as a co-investment with this other kind of like micro VC, super angel, and you should meet him. So I go, I guess, okay, fine. Like, so I meet this guy, and he immediately got really excited about what we're doing. And I told him what we're, the plan. And he goes, "You know what? I'm going to give you $1 million. Like, here, just that one guy is going to write me $1 million check." And obviously that got me super excited. So I reached out to a guy that I used to work with at Chase, who's now become a VC. And when I had spoken to him before, he, kind of intimated that I was way too early for him. So he, I said, "Look, there's this guy, claims he's like a small VC. He wants to put in $1 million right now. What do you think? Should I take this money? Like, what should I do?" And then that just spiraled into him responding with, "Wait, whoa, hold on a second. Can you send me your latest pitch deck?" Remember, this is a month and a half later now. So I send it to him and he goes, "Wow, you made a huge amount of progress. I'm really impressed by this. Don't sign anything until we talk." So I meet with him. We, he brings on all these people from his company on the call now. He's like, "We already spoke about you internally," since you to deck. And so they were like, "We want to give you like 2 or 3 million." And so, at that point, when I mentioned by the stops and starts on the call, right? So I follow that down and I think to myself, wait, well, I wasn't planning on doing a institutional like round here, but I have heard that you never want to have like one. So that's why I immediately reached out, because you have like zero pricing power, right? So I immediately reach out to other people that I know and say, "Hey, are there other VCs you can introduce me to?" And so I started meeting some others. But really the message the whole time was like, look, I'm not planning on raising money from institutional investors right now. It just happens to be that like I've been approached by some. So if I'm going to be evaluating this, I want to obviously meet others. Anyway, long story short, both of those investors ended up not working out. One of them was the guy who wanted to just write me $1 million. He started getting more and more excited about crypto. And he started saying things like, "Oh, well, don't you want to change your business to be like crypto and this and that?" And I really thought long and hard about it, because he was giving me $100 million. I just decided in the end that no, like if I happen to be doing something that crypto made sense for, sure, like I would consider it as almost like a tech stack. But I wouldn't be, I'm not just changing it just because it's like a hot fad right now. And so, we ended up kind of parting ways. He's now 100% only does investments in crypto. He started a fund with like 4 other guys, and that's all they're doing today. So, and he kept the channels up and said, look, if you ever decide to do something crypto, I'd really like you as a founder. So, so that didn't go anywhere. The other one was, but he did give me a ton of advice along the way. He gave me a lot of feedback, and also in his diligence, he asked for a bunch of things that I hadn't done yet. So I did those. I did a much more detailed financial model. I did all this other stuff that I hadn't really gotten around to because he kind of pushed me to do it. And then, and then with the other one, it was a large VC that's well known. They basically got to the diligence step and found that one of their portfolio companies may potentially want to do something at some point similar to what we're doing. And so as a policy, they don't invest in companies that compete. But the partner told me that, like, basically this doesn't mean no for never ever. So like, just keep going. And, if 9 months from now, their portfolio company hasn't done anything with it and whatever, they might be able to revisit that. And he actually introduced me to 5 other VCs. He forwarded me even the email he sent them saying how great he thought we were, and that unfortunately he couldn't invest because of a conflict, but otherwise he wanted to. So that's so that obviously led me to a bunch of those meetings. And so I decided after those 2 kind of didn't work out that, like, wait, hold on a second. I don't really need all that money. Like, that wasn't really my like goal here. If someone happened to give me a bunch of money at a really great valuation, of course, I'm not going to say no. But I also did realize that, and heard that it's really good to have relationships over time. And so I continue to meet with institutional investors, not for this round, but with the idea being that for like 1 or 2 rounds later, I want to be at that point when I do my full seed or series A to already know someone for 9 months and to be able to show them, like, they can see like everything that's happened since we first met and the progress that's been made. So that's, so my sort of focus shifted to that. So it's more of it was like a longer term approach to the institutional meetings I had. Meanwhile, I kept meeting with other people, non-institutional angels and stuff like that, and smaller investors who could complete my round.
That's great. What you demonstrated is investors all have FOMO, something that many founders don't understand. Investors want to invest. They want your idea, crazy idea, to work out, and they're willing to take a chance on it. If they don't, it's probably because it doesn't fit their investment thesis, or they're just not seeing the differentiator or don't have confidence. But you get that FOMO going, they will say, whoa, 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 hang on a sec. Don't keep us out of the party, and even for a future relationship. And then investors have a way where we want to get in good with other investors and refer deals to each other because they may, reciprocate later on. So you have that one investor that went into crypto and said, I really like you as a founder, and kept the door open. If you ever do anything in crypto, come talk to me. So you once again reaffirm the point of investors invest in founders, not in the companies or the particular products. And then the next thing is you've kept the relationship going for the future. The sooner you start it, the more you can show them that they've grown, and then you'll be very well set off for, hey, listen, you pick up the phone, you're at your A round and say, we've been growing X% year over year. It's been 2 years since we last talked. We're ready for this. Here's, we're profitable, whatever the story is. And it's much easier to get that meeting now versus having to cold call and go through the whole thing. So my question, how much time are you spending on this? So let's say you have your full-time job as the CEO, and whatever that is, 40, 80 hours a week, depending on, how much you're burning the candle at both ends. What percentage of that are you allocating to funding?
Yeah, so that's another very good question. That everyone I'm sure has their own way of thinking about this, but what I found even in my prior jobs was that it's really, really important at any point in time, let's say a week or month, whatever period of time you choose, to have a number one priority. And then obviously you have the other things on your list that you got to get done, but have that number one priority. And that number one priority should be like more than 50% of your time, right? Maybe even 60 or 70% of your time. I find that if you just try to do like four things all equally, none of the things really end up getting moved that far forwards. And so when I decided like, okay, I'm focused now, I am going to raise money. That's what I did. So I spent probably 60 to 70% of my time during that period on the fundraising in one shape or another. Now, obviously there's some overlap because like, as you're thinking about things you want to pitch, that's helping you also with thinking about your product strategy and roadmap and other things you need to put in there anyway, right? But that was kind of my focus. And I realized my number two focus was on hiring some team members, especially on the technology side, since I have had some technical experience in the past, but I wouldn't say that I'm, like as strong of a CTO as the person that I would want to be my CTO. So I had the product being developed offshore and I was managing that. But I knew what I wanted. And I realized the US market was was extremely tight for technical resources. People asking either for enormous amounts of money. And when you're an early stage company and there's all these companies you can see in the news raising hundreds of millions and can pay people enormous amounts of money for something that's already like a well-known kind of company, it's tough to get really good people. And so I realized, okay, if I don't have enough money to pay a proper salary, I'm limiting my pool of talent significantly. If I'm saying the only guy I can get is someone who doesn't have a salary, who doesn't require a salary. So these things all kind of work together. So that was sort of my strategy, was really focus on raising that money. It was number one focus while continuing to invest in. So once I got to about 70%, 60%, 70% of like the amount raised, I ramped down the funding time to maybe like 40% of my time and ramped up the team hiring, like networking and whatever time that I was spending. So that's why, I closed the round, and then also like within like a week or so had an offer with a really, really top CTO, which I'm really excited about joining our team. But I don't think I would have been able to attract that CTO if I hadn't already raised as much money as I had, because like they gave him confidence to know that as the business non-technical person that I'm like strong on the business side to get stuff done. So that's cool. So I can talk more about the recruiting thing, but that's probably more of a different call.
Oh, people would have so many questions about that. I think I'm going to get you on another session here. Okay, so full-time job. Let me blast through your pitch deck super quick, and
Sure.
that way
The other thing I'll add too is that like I was given advice that to never take the foot off fundraising, not only networking for fundraising. So like, even though I finished the round, I'm not planning on not talking to anyone until the next round. That's really important. So, and that's actually one of the companies that we're probably going to partner with, one of the credit card companies, their startup. The CEO there told me that he didn't get this advice or didn't follow it. I'm not sure. And so when he got to doing his next round, he had to then start from scratch at that point, reaching out to people, and he didn't realize how hard that was going to be. So it's just very, very important to like always, as the CEO or whoever's responsible for that in your company, like they said, like you might want to switch up the percentage of your time, but never make it 0% of your time.
That's great. And this is something for all other founders here. If you're the CEO, you have two jobs: don't run out of money and don't run out of money. And how you prioritize, and that might be, we're working on our revenue, we're working on scale or fundraising, networking. But welcome, Stephen. You're now into this. Now you're going to start thinking about a route, and you got to manage your runway. And guess what? It is a lifetime of work as the CEO to constantly be thinking about funding in some form or another, whether that's revenue or with your investors and then investor relations. It never stops. Never stops. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at this. So I'm gonna just point out a few things, and again, I've got kind of sort of a final question for you that I think you'd have tremendous great insight, something I've been picking up as you've been talking. But we went into problem slide, and then we had solution slide, and it's just very straightforward. And then you have sort of your features slide, if you will, and then your business model, how you're going to make money, and then sort of the potential. This is investors, love to see. And then your TAM, and then competitive analysis. And what's really great, what I loved about your deck was just, it was so straightforward. It wasn't like uber designed up. It didn't look like, you'd pay a designer to go through everything. It was very nice to look at. You highlight your team, advisory board, and these were very important people as far as advisory. And then you had your ask, and then you put in your traction, which is great. A lot of great names here, which is always helpful. And then that's it. And this was the screener deck we had requested just to be able to send out. And it was important for me to be able to understand that you could condense your pitch so that we could quickly get you out there, so investors could say, yay, nay, different things like that. So that's what I wanted to see for you. And clearly it's been working out since you built that arsenal. Here's the question for you. And I'd love for you to share just your mindset. So you were saying that I wasn't really looking to raise from institutions, and you clearly had a plan. So obviously you already had a product and it was working. You had traction. You didn't necessarily need the money. It was like the $2 million. You were willing to wait. It's kind of like that dating scenario where it's like, I'm not desperate to get married right now to the first girl that I meet. Walk me through your mindset and how you set up your company to be in that place where you were raising, but you didn't need the money. You weren't desperate. Like, what's going through your mind? What's the strategy in terms of building the product, raising, how those two work together? I'm totally curious.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I took a negotiation class when I was in business school. And it was actually one of my favorite classes. And so I just remember in there's always when you're negotiating, the number one thing they tell you about is this thing called BATNA, which is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, right? And whatever your alternative is to a deal with that individual, however good that alternative is basically, that's going to help you drive a better deal with whoever you're speaking to. So that was like always in the back of my mind too. It was just thinking, look, if I am raising money, it means that whatever I'm doing that's not a deal with them needs to be so good that I'm willing to walk away from the deal with them. So that's just underpin kind of like my mentality in general. But yeah, I always, like I said, I originally wanted to bootstrap. I wanted to really I read a bunch of stuff. I watched a lot of things about people raising money, whatever. Reid Hoffman has some great YouTube videos of like all these people who come in and he interviews. And for me, it was just like really critical to like, I wouldn't say I've never done fundraising really, and I haven't done really a ton of sales before. So for me, um, you know, I figured I wasn't going to be able to sell ice to Eskimos. So what I had to be good, and it had to do in a way that I didn't come across as desperate. And that's why, like for example, for the development, I use this for the prototype. I use this cheap foam in Pakistan. Let's be honest, I'm not really going to be using them like going forwards. But I knew that. But they were 20,000 bucks, and I had enough money to put 20,000 in. So I knew I'd have something that I could have built so I could prove that the product works and it can do what we want it to do, um, without spending like an enormous amount of money. If that makes any sense.
100%. Now, one of your alternatives that you had in your mind was, I can bootstrap. You said, I'm willing to bootstrap this. So that puts you out of that desperation zone, which creates that FOMO, that momentum, what have you. So how did you get to that point where you could choose that option of bootstrapping? Did you take out a loan? Did you chunk in your retirement savings? Like, how did you get into that position?
A good question. So, so I had the idea to do this business in January. I actually got the idea while I had COVID, and I was lying in delirium on a bed, and somehow like things just connected. Sometimes creativity works that way. And, Benjamin Franklin had his bathtub. I guess I had my COVID. And as soon as I decided I wanted to do it, I realized that I needed to like financially structure my life so that I could do it. And so I did decide to cash in my savings, my retirement savings, even though I'm going to probably pay, higher tax on them. I have to be honest though, I always thought that I might want to do this. So I actually had always used the Roth 401k. So it still minimizes the amount of risk, since I already paid the upfront tax at least on it. And then, so I did cash that in. So I will have a decent sized tax bill this year, which will be painful. And I just figured out like, how much do I need to feel comfortable? Because I actually don't believe that you want to be like feeling like you're on the edge financially. I don't think you do your best work. I think that's when we go to our lizard brain and you stop being able to make good decisions. So I just made sure I had enough cushion there. I also took out a home equity line on my house. I rented out my house to someone else, and I'm living somewhere cheaper with my kids. So I've got kids too, so I have to consider that. So I'm getting now more rent than the covering cost of the house. And then I took out the home equity line, and then I got advice from another entrepreneur that said that I should actually draw down the entire home equity line amount and put it into like a savings account. Because if they find out that you don't have a job anymore, some banks will just shut down your access to the line of credit. So basically between the liquidated retirement savings and my home equity line amount, I realized, okay, I have enough here as a cushion for myself. I said I wanted to have at least 2 years of my own like lifestyle to pay for, plus being able to put in at least 100,000. Obviously, everyone's finances are different and what age they are, etc. But 100,000 into the business. So that was my kind of my goal. But everyone has their own ways. I mean, the Airbnb guys like invented their own cereal brand just to fund Airbnb. So there's not one way, but I could never do what they did. I mean, they literally had no money. They were like
Credit cards
to live on.
Yeah.
They had credit card bills. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know the story very well.
Yeah. So
So
I don't think that's me, so.
But it's another example of you being a very formidable founder and willing to do what it takes, having the financial discipline and saying, I'm willing to go all in on this versus use investor money. I know founders who are having a hard time raising it, and they are engineers at, FANG, the companies, and they're in the mindset of, they're making $250,000 a year, and they're like, well, I'll just use other people's money. And that doesn't really bode well for especially angels and initial upfront investors, because we want to believe in the founder, and we want to believe that the founder believes in themselves. So you bet on yourself, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It's a great story, and I think we're gonna hear it
Yeah.
and learn from it. But
I didn't
okay,
actually use it. I didn't actually really tell most of the investors about that.
sure.
So maybe I should have, based on the way you're reacting. But yeah, I never actually mentioned.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, and I do think it'll be part of the fabric of your culture moving forward. Not to make it all about Steve and, hey, look at what I did and what have you, but this is the type of belief that we have in what we're doing, and the belief of what you're willing to do for your company. That just uh, gives so much confidence, so much assurance to even be on your team. You're the type of CEO that I would look at and admire and respect, and say, I'm willing to work hard for Stephen as the CEO of this company. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I had a guy that I was considering as an early co-founder, and he said he was unemployed at the time already anyway. And he goes, "Why are you leaving your job? Like, we don't know for sure this is going to work." And I was like, "Well, first of all, if I don't leave, we'll never know, you know." And because I think you really do need to be 100%. There's a lot of people I've met in the founders groups here through this community that are doing startups kind of on the side, and that does work for some people. But I really feel like it's very, very hard to do it, to do a full-time job and do something else at the same time. Obviously, not everyone has that choice. They have spouses that are in favor of that, whatever. But that's what I found, because I tried a number of things in the past, and the difference when I quit, like I did probably in 2 weeks the amount of stuff that I'd done in like the prior 2.5 months, right? Like the momentum plus, like if you go to investors, no investor wants to know that you're not all in. So that's a huge thing. The second thing I said to that co-founder was, "You're right. This initial idea might not actually work, but we'll get to one that does then." So far I haven't had to really change it a whole lot, but you just have to be open to saying, yeah, we might have to change course at some point, and just know that you're going to be able to do it.
So inspiring, Stephen. I'm a fan, big
Thank you.
fan. Look forward to sharing this adventure with you. If you'll indulge me, here's my last question.
Sure.
It's something, I'm being selfish now. What are you doing and taking advantage of in our founder group ecosystem? And what would you recommend on how other founders could take advantage of this ecosystem, the startups.com community and what have you? What advice do you have? What are you doing and what advice do you have?
So I would say I'm probably not using it enough, but I've been showing up to every one of the monthly, forget if I ever don't get the lingo right, but like our fund founders group
Mhm.
meetings. And I think they're really valuable. Like, even if you're not learning the content, just feeling like there's other people, you're with some other people, almost like a fraternity type thing. It's huge to have that. Um, and then also, I did the workshop. There was like a fundraising workshop I did very early on. That was really helpful with Elliot. Because even just I'm literally, I knew nothing, even just like lingo and how it even works and everything. Like I didn't know anything. So that was really, really critical. And then I did a one-on-one with him, and that was really helpful. And he actually put me in touch with someone who ended up, actually, they didn't invest, but they were being very influential, because they happened to also have some e-commerce companies of their own. So it was really helpful contact from that perspective. So I just, that was really, really helpful. So yes, the workshops, one-on-ones, the founders groups. I really like the new speed dating thing. I highly recommend that. So yeah, I think it's good. And I'm just, so I'm a big fan. And then, like I said, there's so much more content I haven't even used, like, so.
Yes. Well, we're trying to just load the plate up and make it like a buffet. So Elliot, if you're watching this, when you watch this, you get the MVP. So kudos to you. Stephen, I cannot express enough how much of a pleasure it's been just to listen to you and your thought experience. You've been so generous with just sharing and being vulnerable and open. You are the type of founder that I hope other people will just, get to know. And I'm pretty sure just how the way that you occur, you're going to be doling out and dropping these truth and wisdom bombs for other founders for many years to come, and other people are going to learn from you. So I wish you well on your journey and your success.
Thank you so much. But I also, I feel like this community probably has a lot more to teach me than I have to teach it. So,
Well, look forward to building that relationship.